The story began with the introduction of the main character of this anime. Ringo Ohashi is a nuclear technology expert, Aoi Ichijo is a martial arts expert, Keen Kanzaki is a medical expert, Masato Sanada is a billionaire and business expert, Prince Akatsuki is a magician, Shinobu Sarutobi is a former ninja and spy expert, and Tsukasa Mikogami is prime minister and politicians. The scene switched when they were all on a plane, but suddenly the plane they are on crashes. Then it was shown an elf named Literule and a Buma human named Winona who were looking for plants and fruits to bring home as daily food. On their way to the forest, they saw a plane flying and wanted to take off uncontrollably, and then the plane crashed not far from where they were. After waking up, Tsukasa realized they were no longer on the plane with his other friends. Tsukasa then asked Lyrule where all his friends were. Lyrule tried to calm Tsukasa down and replied that his friends were not far from where he was lying. Tsukasa then thanked Lyrule for helping all of them who were in bad condition. Lyrule then brought Tsukasa goat's milk soup because she realized that Tsukasa had just woken up after days of sleeping. Tsukasa, who was still weak and had just woken up, said he couldn't eat all the soup and meat. Lyrule then offered herself to feed Tsukasa the chewed meat straight from her mouth. It certainly looked the same as an indirect kiss, but when she was about to feed Tsukasa, Winona came in to introduce herself. Seeing Winona, Tsukasa realized she was not fully human. Winona said that she was a Buma. Buma was a human who had an animal-like appearance such as long furry ears and a weasel-like tail. Like Winona, Lyrule was also not a human but an elf with pointed ears to the sides, beautiful and charming. Tsukasa then asked whether the two of them knew Japan. Lyrule then turned to Winona and replied that they had never heard of a country like that. Tsukasa denied all of that and couldn't believe it. Tsukasa asked why they spoke Japanese if they didn't know Japan. Winona said the language they were using right now is called Alta, not Japanese. Tsukasa then asked Lyrule to take him to the crash site of their plane. With a heavy heart, Lyrule finally agreed and said she would keep an eye on Tsukasa because his condition was still unstable. On the way, Winona and Lyrule said they found Tsukasa and his friends 4 days ago in a landslide that left the plane's wreckage beside them. At that time, they saw Tsukasa and his 6 friends still alive. With uncertain feelings, Tsukasa tried to accept this incident, and he told Winona and Lyrule that they were all stranded in another world. In the evening, the villagers of Frejigard celebrated Tsukasa and his friends' recovery and provided special dishes to eat amidst a warm bonfire celebration. One of the dishes served was boiled potatoes. The small children from the village of Elm felt bored and didn't want to enjoy the potatoes made. But Tsukasa made something different to be enjoyed together by making mayonnaise served over boiled potatoes. Mayonnaise was an essential condiment that the villagers had never tasted before. This made them feel interested, and they liked Tsukasa's mayonnaise. In the warm conversation between the villagers and Tsukasa, also his friends, it turned out that Winona's son, Elch, a village treasurer, didn't want Tsukasa and his friends to stay in the village. Tsukasa did not remain silent and only burdened the residents. Tsukasa and his friends would decide to take a big step to deal with their current strange situation. According to Tsukasa, there were 3 things they had to deal with. The first was gathering information about the world of Frejigard, such as the type of tribe, the city's background, and the magic they used. The second was to find a way to get back to Japan. The last one was rebuilding the village finances in return for the kindness of the Elm villagers. The next day, Ringo, a great scientist, made the cell phones they had so they could connect to the internet. This aimed to make it easier for them to find any information. Also, Ringo did not forget to re-examine the plane she was on and found a component called a mini nuclear reactor as a resource that could be used for a power source project. The location of the plane crash gave Ringo an advantage because she found a cave containing lots of bauxite ore that could be used to make aluminum. For Ringo, making aluminum was not complicated because she already remembered all the designs and would be finished in approximately 3 days. However, due to limited facilities for producing aluminum, Ringo asked Tsukasa for help to find sufficient resources. Tsukasa agreed and would make the merchants in the village find the resources Ringo needed. But in the middle of the conversation with Ringo, Tsukasa heard the commotion that was going on between Winona and the troops passing through Elm Village. It turned out that the troops forced the residents to give up meat and liquor for them. Sheed, who commanded the troops, said that he was the Frejigard country's troop, and all they asked for was a form of assistance offered to all the women in the village whose husbands were away. Instead, Sheed also said that as long as the male residents were out of town, the women had to give up their bodies to satisfy their depraved lusts voluntarily. Tsukasa then came and refused the offer firmly, but Sheed felt that Tsukasa's rejection was a form of humiliation that he had never received in his entire life. She'd finally brandished his sword so the troops could draw their swords and kill all the Elm villagers. However, what happened was not bloodshed. Instead, Aoi and Shinobu had already paralyzed the troops rushing forward. Because of his defeat in the robbery, it seemed that She'd had another plan, namely to report it to the emperor of the higher kingdom so that the residents would be immediately punished. Of course, this would not be allowed by Tsukasa and the others. Prince Akatsuki finally threatened the troops with illusion magic to silence their mouths. The next day, Masato and Elch went to the New Chillin Company in Dormant City to negotiate the price of food stock for Elm villagers during the winter. It turned out that the trade minister named Jakoi rejected Sanada's offer and said they couldn't find another way because the New Chillin Company was the only company legalized in the country. Sanada didn't mind the rejection at all and decided to leave, but Elch was very worried about the deal that happened at that time. Sanada tried to convince him and promised to make a profitable decision instead of following the trading fraud. Sanada gave several special techniques to pursue the financial targets he had planned from the start. That was all he did in return for the kindness to the villagers of Elm. The next day, it turned out that Sanada and Elch got permission to trade from the mayor, Walter von Hazerad, by making small threats about the large funds flowing into his personal pocket. They finally got a trade certificate to silence the mayor's fraud and started looking for merchants around Dormant. Sanada offered a tremendous advantage that was different from the New Chillin Company. This made the merchants agree and want to hand over all the stock of goods without the need to pay a fee. The trading location in the city center provided a huge opportunity to sell all the items entrusted to Sanada. Elch and Rue, a Burma girl and former slave, decided to join the business. The profits they would get were used to buy the resources needed by Ringo to help with her aluminum research for 3 days. After that, the remaining money could be used to purchase horse-drawn carriages and food supplies for the winter. Jakoi, who heard the news, also tried to follow the trade tactics of Sanada and the others. The next morning, Jakoi received news from his company's employees that they could not get the remaining stock of goods. Jakoi went downtown and found all the merchants who initially sided with him turned out to be on Sanada's side in trading contracts for 3 years. Jakoi then promised to deliver their goods at a higher price than Sanada. However, the merchants had more faith in Sanada than in Jakoi. In this way, the New Chillin Company's trade was finally destroyed. Sanada, Elch, and Rue created a trading company with a well-thought-out strategy that benefited both parties. On the other hand, Shinobu started her action by researching a lot of information about many things related to the country of Frigigard. Shinobu told Tsukasa that there were 4 basic spirits: fire, water, wind, and earth. With these 4 basic spirits, it turned out that they could produce miracles in Frigigard. It was rare for someone who could use magic, except for the magicians in the king's castle in Findolf's territory. Besides that, the information that Shinobu got was about a religion called the Seven Lights Faith that had been spread several centuries ago by the Frigigard kingdom and other religions that had been destroyed to their roots. The reason for the destruction was based on the kingdom, which had a law not to allow the existence of gods in the kingdom. In searching for this information, Shinobu also heard that to get out of the city, someone had to get permission from the area's ruler, Marcus Findolf, who was already famous for his brazen nature. One of the emperors under the territory lord they had just talked about had finally come to the Elm village. The emperor was named Inzaki. Several residents and Tsukasa and his friends were arrested on charges of betraying the kingdom by illegally collecting gold coins. Sanada denied that accusation and said he had a trading license and was making profits according to trading contracts. Emperor Inzaki did not accept this defense, because for him, the gold coins that symbolized the sacred symbol of the imperial dragon Frigigard were only meant for residents of high castes and not for the commoners who lived in remote villages, especially Elm villages. As punishment, Emperor Inzai ordered his troops to burn the house and the people in it. After the troops left, Prince Akatsuki immediately rushed to help all the previously trapped inside residents. Without them knowing, Lerule was kidnapped by the troops to become Marcus Findolf's concubine. Tsukasa and his friends finally planned to take revenge, save Lyrule and bring down the cunning emperor who only looked at living things from their caste. The attack began by deploying cannons fired at the kingdom, and the villagers attacked through the kingdom wall, which had been destroyed blindly using iron shields, arrows, and swords. Tsukasa and Shinobu then went to Marcus Findolf's room and divided the task to deal with the royal sorcerer and Emperor Inzagi. After Tsukasa managed to save Lyrule from the Marcus, she suddenly said that the people of the country of Frigigard must be saved from the mouth of a giant and evil dragon. Lyrule then came to her senses and said she didn't know what had happened earlier when Marcus almost kissed her. The next day, Tsukasa and the others surprised all the residents of Dormant by scattering streams of Seven Lights Faith, where Prince Akatsuki acted as God and gave them mayonnaise as an offering of blessings. The plan went smoothly, considering the magic performance given by Prince Akatsuki invited admiration and joy for the residents who were under Seven Lights' faith. Tsukasa intended to reorganize the country of Frejigard as a democratic and advanced country for the residents, but he still took advantage of the main founders, such as Mayor Walter and the nobles who already held positions there, to continue to carry out their roles under Seven Lights' faith. Mayor Walter was a witness to the Seven Lights' faith to hold the city's authority according to the agreement. The Angles, consisting of Tsukasa and the others, not only got authority over the trading business, but could also get the army from the lords of Findolf and Dormant, which were united into the Knights of Seven Lights, commanded by a silver knight named Zestu Bernard. War broke out again between the Seven Lights faith and Emperor Oslo el Gustav, commonly called the Duke. He was a knight and a sorcerer who ruled the northern region because he planned to destroy the Seven Lights faith, which were considered rebel empires now standing in Frejigard. Shinobu and Elch finally traveled to the village of Kokonano to investigate the northern lands led by Emperor Gustav. The village, filled with happy, loving faces, turned out to have a dark reality. They killed the lives of immigrants to be confiscated all their property and sold their organs to support their needs. A knight under the leadership of Emperor Gustav named Jean du Lebling turned out to have the same grudge as the villagers of Kokonano and formed an alliance of members of the Blue Army under the leadership of Count Blumhardt to stop the heinous policies arranged by Emperor Gustav. Finally, after the conversation between Jean and Shinobu under the dungeon, Jean decided to cooperate with the Seven Lights faith, taking action. When winter was over, the 100,000 troops deployed would initially move towards Dormant to start the war. However, Gustav was furious because he was impatient and would not allow the Knights of the Seven Lights, who he considered dirty opponents, to continue living in the great country of Frejigard. At night, Emperor Gustav then hurled a celestial fire spear toward the city of Dormant and made the entire town tense while resting peacefully in their homes. Ringo planned to change the traverse of the Firelands to escape the settlement and turn towards the river using an anti-air missile attack. However, the attacks that were given 4 times were fruitless. The heavenly fire spear landed in the city center, and Emperor Gustav started casting fire magic called Lage Soleil. Some of the townspeople of Dormant became spirits of fire and burned due to Emperor Gustav's wrath. But in this tense situation, Tsukasa and Leroux still had one idea, which was to throw one person using a missile and then destroy the heavenly fire spear so that the flames raging all around could be immediately extinguished. The situation was immediately under control thanks to the cooperation that existed between them. Tsukasa finally planned to attack the northern region first by deploying 50 modern armed troops commanded by Zestu Bernard. The attack carried out by the Seven Lights army for the first time was at the Ruruk fortress and succeeded in repelling Gustav's troops commanded by Marquis Arkwright, who originally intended to rest there. The setback of the troops forced them to take other means by moving to the Buchwald area. However, Tsukasa and Commander Bernard had indeed predicted their arrival, leading to Gustav's troops' defeat. Gustav's death was just a dream for Tsukasa and his friends. Gustav got stronger and gave his whole body to the fire spirit so that he would be stronger in trying to destroy Findolf's territory again. The Blue Army, who already knew the plan, then threw arrows to signal Gustav to start a war that would force him to surrender or die in their hands. Day after day passed. It turned out that their victory had not solved all the problems that had happened to Kokonano village residents and Findolf. The outbreak of an infectious disease made the residents fall sick, and the Knights of the Seven Lights could not find a medicine to cure the disease. Leroux and Keen were trying to find the right composition of medicine that was effective in curing the residents. Holy water, or what was commonly called an antibiotic by humans, turned out to be the key to their healing, which was being endeavored to increase its production so that the residents could recover completely. The leaders of the Gustav Empire didn't want to sit idly by and were still trying to bring down the image of the Seven Lights faith in various ways. Someone named Count Sorrentius was a very cunning doctor. He tried to beat Keen's prowess as a doctor who was very skilled in her field. His efforts in causing various problems for Keen could be overcome by brainwashing Sorrentius and his colleagues and making them slaves. Located in a kingdom, Rommel von Conrad, one of the Blue Nobles, came to General Nero Urivius to ask for help so that the Seven Lights faith could be defeated and the city of Findolf, Kokonano, and northern region could be taken back. General Nero agreed and assisted in the form of 10,000 troops and a magician holding Lage Soleil, who turned out to be Gustav himself. The big war happened again to show who was more deserving of controlling the country of Frejigard. The Knights of Seven Lights, consisting of Tsukasa and 6 of his friends, started the war with the technology they had built together for a long time and were finally able to force the Blue Army and General Nero's troops to retreat and died in the battle. That is the end of this anime. Thank you very much for watching from start to finish. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe for more content.